Good evening, everybody. Thank you all for coming. This reminds me of a story of a couple who is going on a tour through Washington, D.C. And their tour guide leads them through town until they meet the congressional chaplain. And the tour guide introduces them to this congressional chaplain. So they asked, does he pray for the House or the Senate? To which the tour guide responded, he prays for the country. I don't know if I missed that wrong. I didn't mean to. Regardless of how you voted today, and regardless of all the past, whatever you heard in the last many weeks or months, tonight is a night of spirituality. Spirituality is equal for all, especially for all Jewish people. Everyone can appreciate it. It applies to everybody. And we're honored and privileged to have with us all the way from the other end of the world, Rabbi Dr. Laibl Wolf, who is a master in teaching spirituality based on Jewish thought, Kabbalistic thought, Hasidic thought. I spent 2 years in Melbourne, Australia, where he lives. I've been to his center, Spirit Grove, which is an unbelievable one-of-a-kind center where the shul is combined with beanbags and all those spiritual type of stuff where you sit and meditate. Unbelievable experience. We're really privileged to have him. I asked him how I should introduce him. He said the littler the better. So I'm not sure what to say. But all I know is that he had a meeting, a 2-hour meeting with the Dalai Lama, who invited him personally to talk about spirituality. So we're honored to have him, and we'll call him over right now. Thank you.
Tim, not me.
And there he is.
Trust me, it'll be more interesting.
Thank you very much, Rabbi Polter. Great pleasure to be here with you. And I actually can see people whom I've met last night. And I want to particularly acknowledge my very good friends, Cantor Michael Smolesh and Jen, who keep following me here too. So I told them I have to change my jokes from last night. Can't repeat anything. Anyway. I know that we're still in the wake of the tragedy at Pittsburgh. And I came across a piece of writing which maybe some of you have actually seen, but I thought it was fitting to perhaps share it with you. It's by a certain Zev Steinberg, dedicated to the baby who was to be named at the Tree of Life Synagogue on that Shabbat morning. Little boy, what's your name? Do you have one? Sweet baby, just 8 days old, what should we call you? I've heard the sacred circumcision postponed for jaundiced yellow, but never for bloodshed red. Is your name Shalom? We long for peace in this troubled world. I hope you're Shalom. Is your name Nachum? Oh, how we need to be comforted in our grief. I hope your name is Nachum. Is your name Raphael? Our broken hearts and bleeding souls need healing. I hope you are Raphael. You should have been carried high into the congregation on Shabbat morning, passed from loving hands to loving hands on a cushioned pillow to receive your Jewish name. Instead, your elders fell and were carried out on stretchers in plastic bags, their names on the tags. Is your name Moshe? Our unbearable anguish and rage demand justice. I hope you are Moshe. Is your name Ariel? We need the ferocious strength of lions to protect our people. I hope you are Ariel. Is your name Barak? We need courageous warriors to vanquish our enemies. I hope you are Barak. The blood on Shabbat morning was supposed to be covenantal, not sacrilegious. Sacramental, not sacrificial. Sacred, not unholy. The tears were supposed to be of boundless joy, not bottomless sorrow. The cries were supposed to be mazel tov, not the mourner's kaddish. Is your name Simcha? We need an end to sadness by bringing joy into our world. I hope you are Simcha. Is your name Yaron? We need an end to mourning by bringing song into our lives. I hope you are Yaron. Is your name Matan? We need the gift of children who will bring a better tomorrow. I hope you are Matan. So, little boy, what's your name? Take them all if you will. Take 1,000 names. Be peace and comfort and healing. Be justice and strength and courage. Be joy and song and a gift to the world. Be every good name and every good thing. And, sweet baby, take one more name if you will, because I hope you'll be blessed with a long, blissful, beautiful, and meaningful life. I hope you are Chaim. I thought that was particularly moving. And it's so hard to put into words when our brothers and sisters suffer to this degree. And throughout history, we have had our brothers and sisters suffering to this degree, and yet you and I, therefore, have the absolute obligation of bringing more life into the world, more light, more joy, many more mitzvot. And I wish you a lot of hatzlacha in doing so. We're talking today about love. Last night, I gave a lecture on another emotion, anger. And I said that anger is probably the most deleterious impediment to the flow of love. And yet, this four-letter word is so much misunderstood or bandied around so cheaply. Let me begin like a good chassid. I'm a chassid of the Lubavitcher Rebbe. Although I did meet with the Dalai Lama for a long meeting, I had many more meetings, thank God, with the Lubavitcher Rebbe as well. There are many wisdoms in the world. The story. A man sold his house and bought one single horse. And all the fellow villagers came to him and said, "You're a fool. You mean you sold your whole house for one horse?" And he said to them, "You don't know. Wait and see." And next day, the horse ran away. So they all laughed at him. But he said to them, "You don't know. Wait and see." The following day, the horse came back, followed by 9 other horses. So they said to him, "You're indeed a very wise man." To which he responded, "You don't know. Wait and see." And he asked his oldest son to break the horses in. The son fell off and broke his leg. So they laughed at him. But the father said, "You don't know. Wait and see." And the following week, his country waged war on its neighbor. All the young men were conscripted. Many died in battle, except his son, who had a broken foot. So they said, "You're indeed a very wise man." To which he responded, "You don't know. Wait and see." And the story is endless. I found the story originally in the Talmud. Then I found it in the Hindu tradition. So it's interesting how it travelled. And in the first or second chapter of my book, I explain how many of the Eastern religions are in fact derivatives of Abrahamic teachings. We don't know. We don't even know who is the one that Hashem worked overtime to be our truly loved one. We only know that ipso facto after the event. So let's discover what it is that is the true glue of life, that which binds us to our most loved ones, to our friends, and even to the stranger. So as I said last night, if you now realise you've come to the wrong lecture, this is a good time to get up and go. All right? Let me ask you, what drives you? What makes you get up in the morning and move through the day? What makes you move through life? Give me some thoughts and suggestions. Anybody? Throw out some words.
Some of it depends on the day.
The day, yes. And let's say it's going to be tomorrow, Wednesday. What is that? Say again? Parnasa. Income. Good.
Shiur, a class.
A shiur. Intellectual stimulation. Knowledge. Torah, yes. What drives you? What moves you? What's your fundamental rationale for living? Food? Survival instinct? Very good. Commitment, did I hear that? Helping. Your children? Absolutely. All these obviously are real. I came up with some as I was exploring my own thoughts and security, family, sex, money, love, society, relationship, instinct, God. I have no idea. They all come up in suggestions that I've received from the audience and more. In the Western tradition, many a philosopher and psychologist in the more contemporary times has posited notions and ideas as to what drives us. And it's interesting to have a look at some of these, even if it's in passing. Freud said it's the libido drive. That's the basic driver of human activity. Everything else is subsidiary. I'm simplifying, obviously. Comes along Adler, and he says, absolutely not. It's a quest for control and power. Once we have power and control, we feel safe, and that's what we're seeking. Safety, security. Comes along another individual, Abraham Maslow, and he says, gentlemen, you're all incorrect. It's a hierarchical model of food, clothing, shelter, self-actualization. And one of the things that struck me as I was studying for my Masters of Psychology was that all the textbooks are mutually exclusive, argue with each other, and I concluded no one knows nothing. Until we come to one more individual, someone whose name you will probably recognize quite well, Viktor Frankl. You read his book, the little slim book, Man's Search for Meaning, a very important book, probably one of the most important books in our times. And you know that Viktor Frankl was a Holocaust survivor. He was interned in concentration camps for 4 years. Miracle number 1, he survived. Miracle number 2, he was able to maintain a clinical posture, observing and watching, taking it in. And after the war, he wrote his book, and in it he raised some enigmas that plagued him in his observations. One of them went like this. To the camps often came individuals who were initially healthy, strong, and yet seem to wilt quickly and die if they weren't first murdered by the Nazis. Whereas others who came to the same camps in weakened state, unhealthy, sickly, sometimes lingered on and on and on, defying the odds and even surviving. And this puzzled him. And after the war, he evolved his basic thesis, which was that those individuals, albeit that they were healthy and strong, but lacked loving relationships, albeit in absentia, their bodies gave way. Whereas those individuals who might have been unwell, but had the good fortune of having loving relationships, again, albeit that their loved ones had been torn away from them, willed themselves into survival. Some 50 years later on, with the emergence of the mind-body medicine model, we have clarity that our attitudinal response in life has a significant effect on the chemistry of the body and all the other processes. That an emotional flow, if it were to be highly positive, changes who we are bodily. And of course, the opposite, unfortunately, is also true. Negative thoughts and the like. So this is very significant because if we were to nominate one of the most powerful, if not the most powerful, and I'm going to suggest it is the most powerful, emotional flow, it's love. And therefore, loving people appropriately in each relational context is also a guarantee of good health, but it's much more than that as well. It leads to what we call the rather ambiguous terms, but we all know what they mean, happiness and fulfillment. So, how does Kabbalah and Hasidus propose yet what might be another notion? Well, we actually follow Viktor Frankl quite closely, or should I say that Viktor Frankl follows the Torah quite closely. If I were to nominate one word that were to be the underlying rationale of our lives, it would be the word oneness. Achdut, echad, the word we say in the Shema at the end of the first line. What we seek is connectedness with all things of existence, most powerfully with each other, which we call interpersonal love. But we also crave connectedness with things that are outside of us constantly. Take, for example, knowledge. Someone mentioned knowledge as a quest. We seek information, and when that information is not available or we're problem solving and we can't get there, what's the feeling we have? We tend to call it frustration. Frustration means the experience of distancing, the gap. Not pleasant. What is pleasant is solving the problem, knowing the information, especially if it's an enlightening piece of information that we're gaining for the first time. When you know something, you feel really very, very fulfilled through it. An example, a very simplistic example. If I were to ask you in this room, what is 7 times 6? And you'd say 42, without hesitation. It means you know it. If you have to say to yourself, 7 4s are 28, 35, 42, you don't know it. You know how to work it out, but you don't know it. To know something is to bridge the distance between you and it to such an extent that there's no longer any distance whatsoever. It's you. It's internalized. In fact, the Hebrew word to know, lada'at, occurs early in the Chumash in a rather quaint form. If you're familiar with the Chumash, you'll remember the phrase, "V'Adam yada et Chava," and Adam knew Eve. And you ask yourself, why is the Torah being so coy? Why is it using a euphemism? Why does it say quite expressly to an adult audience, and Adam had sexual relations with Eve? And the answer is, because that would have been inadequate. To know something is more than just to be bodily united. To know something and to know someone means to be emotionally, mentally, spiritually connected. That's what ultimate knowing is. It's much more powerful. And that's what we seek. And that's why we enjoy friendships. And that's why we feel fulfilled with mutually loving relationships. That's why we feel so good when we're acknowledged. One of the things, unfortunately, that we witness, perhaps more so in this country than some others, as I look at the identity and profile of those who are involved in mass shootings in schools and elsewhere, is the fact that they have had such poor parenting. Inevitably, a dissolution of the marriage, often early in their life, and then subsequently a sense of not being wanted or a sense of guilt for having caused that dissolution, even if that's totally unfounded. Not being acknowledged, not being loved. And that is probably the greatest stain that causes that kind of unfortunate development in the growth of a young person. And I just say by way of segue that it's very, very important that we take parenting very seriously. All too often, it's more an issue of my gratification in life, and I have the right to a good life, and the fact that I brought life into the world, well, that's just bad luck. I don't mean it so harshly, because that's not what anyone says, but unfortunately, that's the result. And the tip of the iceberg is the shootings. The tip of the iceberg. Much unhappiness lies far beyond that. Anyway, going back to here. Achdut, echad, oneness. And ultimately, oneness with Hashem, with the Creator. A sense of belonging to the radical act of living. Being in a one-on-one relationship with our Creator. Feeling we are pertinent. Feeling that we are being observed. That we are relevant. I said to my audience last night, and it's worth repeating, every single person in this room is a unique, reincarnated soul brought into the here and now because you individually have something to offer that no one else in the world can. That's why you are alive. Hashem didn't have to bring your soul down. Did so because you have an individual mission. You are gifted. You possess self-worth. And that's very important because, as I'll say later, to truly love someone else, you have to possess self-worth and self-esteem. We'll get there. So that's probably, if you look deeply, not so different from what Viktor Frankl was saying, but taking it perhaps much more profoundly and extrapolating into all things of life. Any questions or thoughts so far? I don't want to feel I've cowered you into submission so quickly. Okay. So there you have it. Oneness, achdut. And the word echad is very, very significant. And there's a lot of philosophical teachings and a lot of Hasidus and a lot of Kabbalah to understand what ultimate oneness is. Of the various characteristics that we exhibit, and specifically amongst the 7 emotions, which I'm going to show you later, The singular one that's dominant is what we call chesed. Chesed is one of the 7 characteristics of emotion. What is chesed? Chesed is a broad term. I know we colloquially translate chesed as kindness and giving and sharing, but we're using it here more specifically. Chesed is that anything that does this from ourselves, outward flow, sharing, giving, contributing, seeing people with what is called in Hasidus the right eye rather than left eye. The right side of the cosmos is chesed. Chesed means kindness, but in all respects. Its equal and opposite emotional tendency is called gevura. Gevura is anything that does this. Bringing in, holding in, storing, narrow angle, constriction. These 2 emotions, or they're really spiritual bases for the emotions, produce on the one hand love and on the other hand fear. In our tradition, the opposite of love is not hate. Love and hate are flip sides of the same coin. When you love someone, you're very attached to them. When you hate someone, you're very attached to them. When you love someone, they're always on your mind. When you hate someone, they're always on your mind. Both are tendencies towards. However, one is good and the other one is perverse. The opposite of love is what happens when you do the opposite. Step backwards, move away. All the shades of fear. Whether that fear be just a mundane fear of fire, of heights and other phobias, or whether that fear be one of awe, A-W-E. We have to step backwards in the face of greatness momentarily. So we have these 2 equal and opposites, love and fear. Chesed, however, is the source of love. It's that. Of course, in a moment, I'm going to say chesed too has to be tempered by gevura. Chesed and gevura are both either good or bad, depending on how you use them. All the 7 spiritual aptitudes for emotion are raw materials. And the way you take the raw materials and manufacture them, then we can give it a value. Love is good. Anger is bad. We do have values. We have axiomatic values. We're not scared of values as a Jewish people. I know we live in a relativistic world where good and bad is democratically decided by popular vote, like today. Nevertheless, no, we go beyond that. Excuse me. When Hashem created the world, Hashem used 10 tools. 7 of these were emotional tools, 3 of these were intellectual tools. And one of the 7 was chesed, and chesed was the dominant tool of all of them. As we say in Tehillim, in Psalms, Olam b'chesed yiboneh, that the world was created by the flow of chesed. So there's a tendency for all good things to be giving and sharing things, and not just humanly, but in all aspects. For example, earth, the ground, which in Hasidic teachings from Kabbalah is a feminine quality. Earth is feminine. That's why when the seed is planted in the ground, it's the earth that nurtures it. And the nature of the earth is to give. The result is growth. On Friday night, when we light Shabbos candles, on Friday night, the feminine quality of the Godhead, the Shekhinah, dominates. And this flows through the woman of the house. And she has the capacity to take the fire of the candle, the yellow and the blue. Yellow, the externality of the fire, and blue, the internal heart of the fire. Blue is chesed, yellow is gevurah. And she balances chesed and gevurah for the whole household in a very spiritual way that lasts a week. That's the functionality of lighting Shabbos candles. Not just a nice, quaint ritual, not even just a nice tradition, not even just loyalty to our peoplehood, continuity, and all the big words that we use sociologically. There's some ultimate truths in the things we do of life, not just the external trappings. Okay, so chesed is the flow that dominates the world. And that's why you and I feel good when we're giving and sharing. If I were to ask you, think back to a moment in your life when you felt ecstatically happy as a child or later, and I have no doubt that your memory will be one of sharing a moment with a loved one, giving and contributing, whether it be emotionally or otherwise. So that's the dominant one, love. So we're talking about something which is really very, very paramount, and yet we speak about it so flippantly in contemporary society. Let me give you a couple of models. Some of you saw this last night. This is the nature of creation. It's made up of substantially 4 parallel worlds, 4 parallel realms, and you and I live in this one here, which is the one of time and space. And we're consciously aware of the flow of time and the nature of space. Consciousness, time, space. Nefesh, Makom, Shana. The world above it, Yetzirah, has no time and space, and the one above it makes that one look physical, and Atzilus makes Bria look absolutely finite. So each one is a quantum leap removed, and they all emanate from a source, the Ein Sof, which means without end, or another word, infinity, metaphor for God. And through these realms flow some emanations. Again, we have the 4 worlds, but we have 10 energetic flows, or 10 lights, or 10 sephirot, as we call them. And as they transcend through these 4 realms, down here in the one that you and I inhabit, 3 of these become mind, Chachma, Bina, and Da'at, and the other 7 become the emotions, the 7 emotions beginning with Chesed, which we were speaking about. If we had time, we would explore this, but I am going to leave that to the rabbis here, Rabbi Hadar and Rabbi Polter, to explain what is an important model, not a statement of truth, but a model, a pedagogical tool to help us understand profound Kabbalistic teachings. And I may have given this exclusion clause last night, but I want to repeat it, and I do it all the time. I think the study of Kabbalah is a complete waste of time. It's cryptic. It's in another language, Aramaic. It makes very little sense for you to spend time on it. It's written code form. You have to crack the code first, etc. So whenever they said you have to be 40 years of age and haven't finished your Talmudic studies, etc., they were quite correct. However, at some point in history, it was felt important that in-depth teachings become part of our understanding and knowledge because of the complications of the world, primarily in the 18th century, and therefore rose Hasidism that began to explain Kabbalah and makes it tenable and understandable. Okay, so let's go back. We've got an issue of love that we're discussing tonight. Now, love is nice, but it may be unwise. Have a look at this model. AM and PM, meaning before the moment or after the moment. Then we've got the axis dividing mind and emotion, seichel and midos. Then we have 4 quadrants. The feelings you have in any one situation that is a powerful moment of either provocation or support. Secondly, the kind of thinking that then interprets it. For example, the child says, give me, give me, give me, and the mother and the father, being very loving parents, give, 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 and the result is the child is spoiled, spoiled, spoiled. So the mere act of love and its corollary of sharing and giving may, in fact, be most unwise. And yet, under strong provocation, emotions flow blindly. And that's why we give, because we want to, in a sense, win the child's love, and we think we can buy it that way. And it's such a common fallacy. The child knows it just has to raise the ante all the time, and it gets more and more. And therefore, in life, it thinks it only is able to ask, and it gets. Love has to be wise. So, for example, if you're being provoked, your immediate response is defensive. The feelings are ones of anger, of being upset that someone dares to speak to you like that. So emotions are quick to the draw. They come up quickly. And when emotions come up quickly, the result is that the mind is taken prisoner. Whether that be anger or whether that be love, it's exactly the same. What do we call it when emotions are taken prisoner? When mind is taken prisoner by emotions, what is that called? It's called rationalization. In other words, the mind justifies the feelings. Of course, I have a right to respond. Of course, I should give my child everything I can, if I can. And that means that the mind is being simply enlisted to serve the emotions. Not that emotions are bad. They may be. But the problem with emotions are that emotions have no wisdom. Emotions have powerful energy, very importantly so, and we should emote strongly. That's one of the characteristics that makes our life worthwhile. It's the joie de vivre of life. But emotions have to be wise. They have to be tailored by mind. So, when you catch yourself in that moment, what you do is you start to allow your mind to give a direction to the feelings. That's quadrant 3. And you change your thinking. And you tell your child, I love you very much. And then you give the assertive no. I don't think it's wise for me to get that for you now. Maybe in a month's time. Maybe if you achieve this, whatever may be the reward practices of your home, etc. And then the feelings that flow when your mind takes over are quite different. You still love your child, but you're loving your child wisely. Same with spouse, same with your boss, same with your employee, same with everybody. I'm only using that as an example. So one of the things we're discovering here is that although love may intrinsically be a very important, powerful, and very fulfilling emotion, it of its own right, without the balance of gevura, the other side of self, doesn't create the best destiny. Look at examples. Abraham, a few weeks ago we read Akedas Yitzchak, that Abraham was instructed to take his son Yitzchak and sacrifice him. Now, Abraham, you might remember, is the epitome of chesed as a characteristic. Yitzchak we'll learn later on, becomes the epitome of Gevurah. And Yaakov is the epitome of the joint balance of the two, becoming Tiferet. But let's stay with Abraham right now. He is all chesed. He's all giving. He and Sarah's life were dominated by entertaining guests at their table. They loved to have guests at the table. And you remember what happened on the third day after his bris at the age of 99, 3 days later. God says to himself, my servant Abraham, he's had a bris, and the third day after a bris is the most painful. I'm going to make it a really hot day. No visitors. They'll be able to take it easy, and he'll heal. And what do we find? Abraham sitting on his doorstep in pain, more pain because he's got no guests. So God looks down and says, made a mistake. You, pop down and visit him. 3 angels. They come down, they visit him. Of course, they have a few other little things to do. One has to destroy Sodom and Gomorrah, and the other one has to give Sarah a baby. Another one has to save Lot. But they're little side issues, mainly to visit him. Abraham's the epitome of chesed. The epitome of chesed is being asked, take your son and slaughter him. In other words, take your opposite side of self, your Gevurah self, and even though you are primarily an expressor of chesed, you have to know how to be wise with the emotion, and at this moment, Gevurah has to dominate. Baruch Hashem, the outcome is fine. But it just shows the kind of tensions in our life and how we need to balance our emotions, and ultimately, moach shalit al halev. As Sefer Tanya teaches the Alter Rebbe, the mind has to determine the outcomes of the emotions. It doesn't make emotions secondary. It's just the emotions don't have a compass bearing. Mind is not foremost. It just doesn't have energy like emotions do. You need to put it together so that compass, wisdom, energy, emotions become appropriate, balanced. Okay, that little model. Let's go a step further. I'm going to give this a miss. Okay, let's move sideways. What's the Hebrew word for love? Ahava. Hebrew is an amazing language. It's unlike any other language. It didn't evolve as a convenient form of collective communication like most languages do. Who created Hebrew? Adam Harishon. You remember, it's in the Chumash. It says, Adam gives the names to all things. How? Well, Adam was a humanoid creature quite unlike you and I. He was able to intuit, for want of a better word, the 22 creative forces that flow from above to maintain the world in its integrity. And he was able then to replicate those 22 forces in 2 ways. One, shape, the pathway that the energy enters into the here and now, which he drew on papyrus, and those shapes are the shapes of the Hebrew letters, 22 Hebrew letters for the 22 creative forces. Secondly, he was able to intuit it energetically and replicated it vibrationally with the lips, pursed, providing sound. So now you have shape and sound, the beginnings of what is the alphabet, Aleph Bet, the Hebrew language. So that, for example, when Adam went outside and he saw what you and I would call a tree, he happened to call it an eitz, which not surprisingly in Hebrew means tree. But how did he know? Because he was able to recognize the ayin force and the tzaddik force that dominate to make a tree a tree. So Hebrew language depicts the truth of something, the essence of something. There's no other language like it in that regard. So we should be able to take the word for love and have some sense through the spelling about the nature of love. So let's do the exercise. Love, ahava, is spelt with 4 letters, right? Aleph, Hey, Veit, and Hey. Vav and Hey. Veit and Hey. I got Vav, that's wrong. Veit and Hey. What is it? Why should it begin with an Aleph? Aleph is, of course, the first letter of the alphabet, but that's not it. Aleph is the only silent letter. There is no other silent letter in the whole Hebrew alphabet other than Aleph. And those of you who would suggest maybe the ayin, not so. If you listen, Sephardi Jews, especially Yemenite Jews, Teimanim, speaking, the ayin has a guttural sound. The Aleph is the only truly silent letter. The beginning of the construction of the human being begins with the beginnings of love. And therefore, the Aleph, the silent core deep within, is most appropriate to begin the word. Next comes the letter Hey. The letter Hey is just breath, hardly any sound. It's when there's the awareness of being drawn to someone or something, the beginnings of conscious love. So it's half a letter. It's got a sound and doesn't have a sound. And then you have the third stage, Veit, the full-fledged vibration of feeling love and expressing love. So the letter which is most aware is the vibrational letter when you purse your lips, v, real. And then you've got this final letter, Hey, again. Why is there another Hey? This time it means Hashem, God, or wisdom. And that is what I said to you earlier. The flow of love, nevertheless, has to have a compass bearing, a direction to be wise in its expression. So you see how the Hebrew language provides us with insight to the true meaning of things. And there's a way of analyzing all Hebrew words accordingly. Now, a big statement I'm going to make. Love is not a two-way street. Love is not an act of fairness. Love is not a democratic institution. Love is a one-way street. And you may be puzzled by that, but it's very simple. I don't love you in order that you should love me. If I love you because I want you to love me, that's called a take. It's even called blackmail. I am exploiting you for my needs. I need love, and the only way I can get it from you is if I show love to you, is not true love. True love is a one-way street. It's only what I give, not what I receive. If I receive it back, that's called bonus. Otherwise, it's a business transaction. Let's see how that sits with you. It's also true to say, as the Sefer Tanya often quotes Mishlei, which says, as a face is reflected in water, so do we reflect each other. It's highly likely if you love truly, you'll get it back, but you don't love someone else in order to get it back. Do you see the difference? That's why you love someone even when they are momentarily emotionally ugly. If you don't like their behavior in the moment, if they disappointed you in the moment, that doesn't cause the love to go away, because you're not dependent on the other person and who they happen to be at the time to love them. You love them unconditionally. Does anyone have difficulty with that? Because I think in the West we do have a lot of difficulty with that. And I think, unfortunately, for the vast majority of people, love is a demand for a two-way street. And if you don't love me back, goodbye, Charlie. I'm going to go somewhere where I can get it. Or the variations on that theme. And that, I think, is the cause of many breakdowns. And that's pure egotism. It's all about me. It's all about I want, I need, even if the person is not fully aware that that's really what they're asking for. And that's really unfortunate. And it'd be good for a friend, a counselor, to be able to make that clear. Love is a one-way street. Otherwise, it's exploitative. And there are many ways we exploit each other, even innocently. I mean, you fall into a pattern of a loving relationship because of the goodies that each brings to the table. She makes wonderful food, he buys wonderful cars, etc. And we rely on that kind of quid pro quo. And the essence of the love very often is lost.
So, do you ever counsel couples if they want a divorce?
Often.
And so, some people do get divorced, right?
Some people will not listen to me and get divorced. Other people's divorce for quite valid reasons. Of course, divorce has validity. It's just that I think in our society, it's done mostly wrongly because of egotistic needs and lack of inner depth of understanding, and therefore not a capacity to actually draw on their true love. Not enough work.
So your own unconditional love definition, how would you define it?
If my son or daughter, God forbid, is a drug addict, if he or she steals, if he or she commits the worst crimes, I will not stop loving him or her. And how much more so for a spouse? Yes.
For spouse?
No different. You'll have to tell it to me. How is it different?
It can be different.
I believe you believe that, but tell me.
I guess if one spouse is cheating.
Yes. Let me tell you that I have been in many circumstances of speaking to a couple where one of the parties has cheated on the other and the marriage has succeeded very well, thank you, afterwards. It becomes a choice, and it depends on the degree to which you feel the pain is tolerable, not tolerable, to the extent that you can actually find that there is a possibility of a future or not. And that's very much defined by your nature, your personality, your character, your beliefs, and it varies from person to person.
Their ego has been hurt because of their spouse.
Of course it becomes a big ego thing, absolutely. But there's no question that harm has been caused. The question is, can we overcome the harm and still maintain love? Of course it's impaired. Of course it's going to have some difficulties. But love isn't one thing. Just like mitzvahs, every mitzvah is one of 613 strands of a cord. And if you don't do one mitzvah, okay, so there's one strand in the cord that is broken. That doesn't necessarily mean the other 612 are broken. That's why I keep telling people, say, well, I'll either do all or nothing. Well, that's ridiculous. You don't do anything in life all or nothing. There's shades. Likewise in love. It's not one cord. There are many elements of thread in that cord.
How important is love in a relationship?
I think it's essential.
How do you explain, like, from Jews who get married after meeting for a month?
What's wrong with that?
It's not love.
How do you know? I know many couples who get married after 1 month, and I know some who get married after 5 years, and I'm not there to judge. And this short answer is, everyone's got the potential for love, and how you express it becomes a highly personal aspect. but everything is possible. I do believe in love at first sight, and I do believe that love can grow long time after marriage. There's no rules.
How do you feel about the concept of loving someone unconditionally but knowing you shouldn't be together?
That knowing that you
Shouldn't be together.
don't know of any such situation that you love someone unconditionally and you shouldn't be together. It sounds like the mind and the heart are having a big war. Something's not quite right when that's taking place. That's not true love. Yes. Very good. The only case of abuse that requires immediate separation is physical abuse. And when there's physical abuse between supposedly loving people, I advocate immediate separation, not divorce, immediate separation, because each party has to be protected. And then you have to see if any one of the two parties who's at fault can grow or not. That takes time. Emotional abuse, and you're going to hate me for this, I don't believe in. Emotional abuse means that someone chooses to be a victim, and you can choose not to be a victim. A person can be very verbally abusive, and there's a reason for that. Not necessarily a good reason, but as one of my lecturers told me, everyone always behaves reasonably, meaning there's always a reason behind their behavior, right? And there's a reason for why people are emotionally abusive. Once again, they need assistance, they need help, and the person on the receiving end has to choose not to be a victim and also learn strategies. And then we watch and see whether we can alleviate the circumstance. But that shouldn't be a first port of call of separation.
What about when the emotional abuse is one on the receiving end is a child?
A child needs protection. I'm talking of adults only. Children, what's a child in our Jewish spiritual tradition? At the last, let me put it this way. We have two aspects of our soul. One's called nefesh behamit, one's called nefesh elokit. Translated in contemporary terms, one part of us is egocentric and the other part of us is altruistic. Egocentricity flows, if you will, through the heart and through the bloodstream. I'm not going to explain how spiritually that energetically becomes so. When a child grows, the last physiological item to complete its growth is the brain. And interestingly, it completes at the ages of 12 and 13 approximately, corresponding to bar and bat mitzvah. That's why when a person is bar and bat mitzvah, they take responsibility, because then the soul, which is always fully grown, there's no such thing as a child's soul. A soul is a soul is a soul, complete, but it can't express optimally until the body has completed its growth pattern. And therefore, since the nefesh elokit, our higher altruistic self, doesn't come into its own until 12 and 13, the child is not responsible and tends towards egocentricity, selfishness, I want, give me, etc., which we call immaturity. Unfortunately, many children continue to be immature adults and still say, I want and give me, except that the toys are no longer trains and dolls, but the toys are other people's wives and shares and the like. Same phenomenon, though, immaturity. So that's why a child needs to be protected. So I grant you straight away that exception. I wasn't talking about children. Okay, let's go a little bit further. So what I call exploitative relationships is user-friendly relationships. We're very friendly with each other, but we're using each other. And that's unfortunate. Let me raise with you a particular individual whose writings were very interesting. His name was Martin Buber. Never became a religious Jew. Interestingly, although at a younger adult age, he discovered his Judaism in Germany and became totally enamored by Hasidism to the extent that he wrote many books and translated many Hasidic tales and borrowed extensively. One of the books that he wrote was called Ich und Du in the German, I and Thou. And one of the items that he teaches in the book is to say that we have two kinds of relationships. One is called an I-thou relationship, the name of the book, and the other one is called an I-it relationship. Example, an I-it relationship is my relationship with a hammer and nail. What's my relationship? I use it. It serves my purpose. I exploit it expediently. A relationship of true love is where I respect the differentness and wholeness of the other as an initially separate being in the eyes of Hashem, who I have to honor and respect. He says, unfortunately, many interpersonal relationships devolve into being I-it relationships, where we use each other like a hammer and nail. Sometimes not knowingly, as I said earlier. And we have to beware on that. Sometimes, following what someone said earlier, a young couple who's contemplating marriage comes to me and says, I'm afraid of one thing. I'm afraid that he or she is so different than me. Shouldn't we have similarities? And I say, if you are the same, how boring is that going to be? The very fact that you're different means that each of you can be a lifelong teacher to the other. Differentness is wonderful. Differentness means that you continue learning from each other. Don't be scared of differentness. Sure, there's got to be a certain degree of commonality of values primarily, belief systems, but personality-wise, no, not necessarily. So I-thou relationships means that you choose to be a facilitator for the growth and development of the other. That you feel so much for the growth of the other and the giftedness of the other that you want to nurture it one or the way or the other way. And that's really important. Hashem has put us together not just so we grow together, but we also equip the other the way that only I or the other can. And there's one very important piece of glue, and this may be the most important point that I'm going to make tonight. The glue of a loving relationship, whatever it be, is commitment. Now, I'll tell you what I mean by commitment. It's different than the common use of the word in English. In fact, I'll give you an example. Do you remember as a child when you first decided that you're going to jump off the diving board into the swimming pool? And do you remember walking across the plank and walking halfway and your heart kicked in and said something to you like, I'm a little bit afraid. And then you walked to the edge and your mind kicked in and said, this is not exactly safe, is it? And then you did something absolutely wondrous. You jumped. Despite your heart, despite your mind, your commitment to the act of jumping was so powerful that it was beyond consciousness of mind and heart. That's the commitment I'm talking about. That is the glue of relationships, where it goes beyond reason. It goes beyond momentary feelings. There's something much more powerful. And that's what ultimately I feel is lacking so much in the Western world today. Even in the business world, or should I say especially in the business world. I was talking to a convention, a Fortune 500 automaker CEOs some years ago, and I remember we were talking about what actually causes success. And I said to them, it's not your wonderful marketing departments that are responsible for your success. What ultimately will be responsible for your success and is the responsible for your success currently is because of the people on the showroom floor and the way they handle their customer and their preparedness to be able to learn the names of the customer and make the customer feel comfortable in your presence and be able to acknowledge the customer in ways that they can detect quickly. Admittedly, it's for financial gain. But nevertheless, people are prepared to pay more in a shop that's more expensive if they're treated well in that shop than to go to another shop where it may be 20% cheaper and be part of the rabble. And we know that from studies. Acknowledgement, which means respect of the other, which is an expression of love, is so terribly important. We need acknowledgement. When you walk in the street and someone passes you by, you should smile. Not because of etiquette, that too, but because your smile may make a significant effect, take a significant effect on that person with your smile. The power of a smile is enormous. Take the risk that they'll misinterpret it. Don't worry about that. But smile. More often than not, it does so much good. And as the Lubavitcher Rebbe says, random acts of kindness. A little bit of light pushes away a lot of darkness. One thin match in a dark room. That's what each one of us is. We add that light. It's a metaphor, but it's so true. Little gestures make a big difference to each other's lives. Oh yes, I was going to ask you, how many of you have been bungee jumping recently? No? Parachuting? Probably not. That's why I was going to then move to diving board, because that's probably more common. Okay. All right. A little slide to finish with. It's very difficult to truly love someone if you don't have sense of self-esteem and self-worth. Or another way of saying it is, if I don't love myself. But I deliberately didn't say that because it's often misinterpreted. If I love myself, what does it mean to love yourself? Oh, I'm great. No, that's not what it means to love yourself. To love yourself means... Do you remember the affirmation that we Jewish people say every morning when we wake up? Begins with the words Modeh Ani. Some of you might remember it from Sunday school or Cheder, but we've outgrown it and therefore forgotten it. And we've therefore lost a very important tool in our self-worth. You know, when you move from the subconsciousness of sleep to the consciousness of the waking moment, that transition is one that leaves a residue for the day. If you wake up and you wake up in a state of fear, I don't want to face the world, I don't want to deal with people, I prefer just to lie in bed, then under those circumstances, the day is going to be coloured by that posture. But if you wake up in the moment with gratitude, with a sense of acknowledgement of the otherness of the world, recognizing that you are a partner with Hashem, then the way that the day goes is radically different. Modeh Ani means I acknowledge the otherness of the world, Hashem. It means I thank you for the opportunity of today. It means I submit my ego and allow a wider angle vision of the world. But that's not the point. The point is there are 3 more words somewhere in those 12-word affirmation that I'm talking about. We come to a phrase called Shechezarta bi nishmati. Translation, you have restored to me my own identity, my own singularity, my individuality, my soul. No 2 souls are the same. Hashem created myriads of souls at the beginning of creation, and they've always remained. No 2 the same. You're reincarnated over and over again. Same soul, different bodies, different environments, different genes, different formative childhood settings, but same soul. If you say every morning that affirmation, including a recognition of your specialness, your giftedness, 7 days a week, 365 days a year, for 120 years, you should get it. That's what self-worth is. Self-worth is to recognize that you have a gift that you can confer on another loved one, that you are special. That doesn't make you great. That makes you gifted to share. You can only love someone if you have love to give. And the love that you can give is because it's been conferred on you. And that's so important. So I want to wish you a lot of success in terms of that recognition. And please, try the affirmation, Modeh Ani, meditatively. I always teach people spend 2 minutes on the Modeh Ani. And on some of those CDs there, I teach how to do that. It's not hard. It makes a huge difference to our day, to our life, to our relationship. Let me tell you the way that my father taught me everything that I said tonight. And he taught it quoting the Kotzker Rebbe. Now, the Kotzker Rebbe was a very, very unusual Hasidic Rebbe. For most of his leadership life, he isolated himself and had very little to do with the world and very little to do with his Hasidim, in fact. Most uncharacteristic and not something that we advocate. And he also taught in very short, sharp, concise statements. And my father, who was raised in Poland as a yeshiva bocher, and there's a tradition in Poland that you actually learn from many different rebbes, remembered some of the teachings that came through the Gere Hasidim, which came through the Kotzker Rebbe, who was their antecedent. And one teaching is very apropos for tonight. And it goes like this. And I'll say it in the same sing-song Talmudic fashion that my father said to me. He said, "If I am I because you are you, and you are you because I am I, then I am not I and you are not you. But if I am I because I am I, and you are you because you are you, then I am I and you are you, and we can talk and love." Now, just on the off chance that after a long day that went a shtickle over our head, let me give you a peirush, a little explanation. If I am I because you are you, I don't have a sense of self. I'm just a reflection of you. And you are you because I am I. And you also don't have your own identity. You're simply an echo of me. Then I am not I and you are not you. You can't have love like that. But if I am I because I am I, if I recognize that Hashem gave me my own particular giftedness, and you are you because you are you, and you also recognize your self-worth and self-esteem, then I am I, whole person, you are you, whole person, and then we can enter into a loving relationship. There's two people who can truly love each other. You see, that's why he was the Kotzker Rebbe and said it in 30 seconds flat, and I'm Laibl Wolf. It's laboured over an hour to try to say the same thing. Okay, so let me leave you with that and see if there are any more questions before I conclude. Yes?
Okay, I'm going to try to articulate it. So, you don't love someone because they love you back, or because you want them to, and you don't love them because of what they can give to you. So, what causes you, or what are you loving about them?
Your soul is drawn to them beyond logic and beyond feelings. There's something very profound that draws you soul to soul at a spiritual level. And we articulate that ultimately through mind and words and expression, and we feel it with our emotions, but that's an expression of that inexorable draw that your soul has to that person. It emanates from you. There's no reason ultimately why you are. That's why we look at some couples and say, I just don't understand. How did they get together? You had a question?
How do you feel about human beings healing each other through energy fields?
Yes.
I know there's nothing that we talked about tonight, but
Yes.
spirituality.
Absolutely.
Reiki, or they call it Reiki, Japanese healing.
The Frierdiker Rebbe, the previous Lubavitcher Rebbe, writes in a work known as Likutei Diburim on the first page that you can project a thought to someone across the other side of the world and through your thought or feeling affect them materially and spiritually across the other side of the world, materially as well with your thought. We don't stop at the surface of our skin. We radiate beyond. That's why sometimes you meet someone and immediately feel comfortable even before they've opened their mouth. And you meet someone else and feel very uncomfortable in their presence. It's as if I can use contemporary language, your auras are intersecting. There's something happening. So yes, we can have even healing capacities, and some people are gifted. But here comes my little bit of warning. I think it's very few. And most of the supposedly healing techniques through energetics is really works, but it works because the person believes they should work on the receiving end, and thinking that something works for you is half of the solution and makes it work for you. So I don't decry it, but does it have veracity essentially? No, but on the other hand, I think it's a good thing that people want to heal each other, and I think it's a very, very good thing to feel that you're being healed.
With respect to the I and thou and the I and it, you could have like beer as an it, like I see the beer as an it, but people could love beer.
You know what I think? I think that I think the word love is very often used as a metaphor. And correctly, it's the use of language. To say I love beer is not really to say that you're in love with beer. What you're really saying is the result of me drinking beer gives me such a sense of pleasantness that it's like loving someone. You're borrowing a word from another context and applying it so that you can express yourself to another person what's going on inside you. And of course, if that's too strong, it's called addiction. 1, 2.
How about when love is attachment or dependency? There's a lot of connection.
Dependency is an I-it relationship, or as the Buddhists would like to call attachment. You see, we believe very strongly in connectedness, which is very different than Buddhism. Buddhism really talks about disconnectedness or non-attachment. That's a singular difference between Judaism and Buddhism as such. But going back to your other word, dependency is a highly exploitative relationship. It means that I need you, not that I love you.
A good percentage of loving is that.
A good percentage of what people call loving is that. Yeah. That's unfortunate. That's why many relationships are fragile. They don't evolve and grow into something much more powerful, the potential, which is always there.
One other thing, and maybe this is too esoteric, I don't know, or maybe it's too basic. You know, with the soul and our souls constantly reincarnating, I mean, how do you know, like, this isn't the beginning today, this physical being of my journey as a soul?
The answer is, it doesn't matter.
Okay, I like that. Thank you. Perfect.
Whether you're here for the first time or for the 101st time doesn't matter, because you don't remember. And there's a reason why you don't remember, because it will complicate this journey of this lifetime. Some very few do remember. And that's not desirable, and the Talmud speaks about certain ways in which rabbis remove the memory of past lives. I don't think by the way, in passing, past life regression is a great therapy. I certainly advocate against it. Not because there isn't such a thing. I sat on a number of panels with the author of the book Past Lives, Past Masters, Many Lives. Yep. And he shared with me that his book is made up of several successful instances amongst many hundreds of failures. What this shows is something significant, that of course there exists such a thing, but as a therapeutic tool, it's very, very unreliable, and in most instances it's the projection of the therapist, so to speak, into the imagination of the client. And that is fraught with a lot of problems, because it can be totally inaccurate. 1, 2, 3. Rabbi, you'll tell me when to stop. Yes.
It was a beautiful teaching that you shared regarding Adam's knowledge of Eve as true love. I'm wondering how that relates to the concept of the spouse as Ezer Kenegdo.
That a spouse is?
Ezer Kenegdo.
Ezer Kenegdo, which is translated in the Old English, that's translated as a help keep. Counterpart is probably much better. But the Rashi, I think it's the Rashi that brings it down. It says, Ezer Kenegdo literally means a help to the person if the relationship is good, but if it's not good, it's a Ezer opposite to him. It defies him or her. Ezer Kenegdo simply says that it's an equal and opposite. Part of the duality of existence is that everything's in twos, right? 2 eyes, 2 ears, 2 feet, 2 hemispheres of the brain. It's dualistic. Another time we can discuss why that is the case. It emanates from a dualistic expression of God, which is masculine and feminine, for example. A masculine side of the Godhead and a feminine side of the Godhead. And every human being possesses both. All men have masculine and feminine components, and all women have masculine and feminine components. But what makes a man is the dominance of the male side, and a woman, the dominance of the female side. Now, this duality was initially in one, an Adam creature, which became split into 2, and then we inherit both aspects of it. So Ezer Kenegdo means that the woman brings out its equal and opposite masculine side of the man, and the man brings out the feminine side of the woman, so that it becomes a balance. Now, what that balance is, what that equilibrium is, we can study, but that's the meaning of Ezer Kenegdo.
So how would you quantify the difference between platonic love and romantic love?
Platonic love and romantic love. I suppose you can take the word love and apply it to mind-to-mind encounter. You can love someone's mind, I suppose, but I think it's a borrowing of the word love, because love is all-embracing. Rather than platonic love, I would prefer to talk about the love of true friendship.
So my question is, if somebody's spouse earns more money than them and they are dependent on them, then how is that not a problem in terms of usury?
I think a person feels dependent when somehow or other the intrinsic love that actually makes the channel for that connection is lost. So we then emphasize dependency. I think that the fact that we exchange goods and services in a loving relationship is perfectly okay. I don't think there's anything wrong in saying, I'm going to dedicate my love to the nurture of the family, our family, and you're going to dedicate your life to maintaining our capacity to do so. I don't think there's a dependency. If it becomes dependency and a person feels dependency, I think there's a diminution of love. One, two, or make these the two final ones.
The Jewish soul, how it's defined in the Torah? Or
The Jewish soul. Okay.
I believe it's made of threads of ancestry from your own ancestry. Do you think it's everyone is an individual soul that's been developed by God?
There are 71 different soul typologies in creation. One of these is Jewish. There's another 70, and each one has its particular role and mission in the creation of the world. It's like a symphony orchestra. When you go and listen to the symphony, what makes it so beautiful? When each musician is true to his or her instrument or notes. What would happen in the middle of a symphony if the violinist got bored of his violin or her violin and jumped across and grabbed the double bass? Or the percussionist got bored of banging away and went and grabbed the piano? The result would be noise. It's when each one is true and committed to its notes that you have the beauty of the collective sound. Same with the souls of the world. There are 71 families of souls. When each one is true to its notes, the symphony of creation plays beautifully. But when the Jew chooses to jump across and try to be a non-Jew, or a non-Jew jumps across and wants to try to be a Jew, the result is noise. That's one part of the answer. The other part of the answer is that there are 600,000 specific souls corresponding to the numbers at Mount Sinai, but that each soul has sparks of soul or families of sub-souls which act like complete souls also, so that you and I might be a spark of a central soul. And at some stage in time, we meet up with our central soul, usually after we die. And it may well be, and it very often is the case, that a soul is reincarnated in the same family, or a spark of soul as such. But we don't know, and it doesn't matter. Yes.
600,000. I thought there were 4 million Jews.
But remember, each spark has each soul of the 600,000 has 600,000 sparks. I didn't say that part. That's already multiplying 600,000 by 600,000, and there's actually many more. In fact, the vast majority of souls are never ensouled at the same time. You know, it's not hard for Hashem to keep creating infinity. The wondrousness of Hashem creation is that He created finity. One more?
One more?
Yes.
Okay. Many of us here have children who are at dating and marriageable age, and not all children are dating within the Jewish religion. Could you
Yeah, that's a very common phenomenon. It's unfortunate.
address that?
Yeah, of course. I'll just repeat what the Rebbe said. It's hard to tell a child, if you happen to be Jewish and being committed to a Jewish marriage as a parent, don't do it, because you've got this strange institution in the United States. When kids reach 18, they finish high school, they leave home, which is very strange for us. In Australia, you live at home until you get married. In South Africa, you live at home until you get married. In Europe, that's often the case also. It's just a quaint institution you have here. At 18, they're suddenly mature and they have to go to college, they have to go away from home, which is unfortunate because there's so many years of modelling still that they could pick up in the parents' home, and that's why I think it's a great advantage to live in Australia. But beyond that, say the circumstance does arise, I would advocate that it be explained that by marrying a non-Jewish person, you're hurting them. You're creating that noise in the symphony orchestra. Forget the question what you're doing to yourself. If you truly love someone else, you don't want to hurt them. And by doing that, you're actually going to hurt them. Okay, it's just one position to take. Yes.
So we were talking about your thoughts being able to
Influence others, yes.
So let's say you have a kid who's off the derech or who's dating out. So how would you channel your energy to please God have some profound...
Okay. Do I have that coming up or not? No. I'll repeat what I said last night, but very, very quickly, because I'm making this my last remark. There are two words, emunah and bitachon. One means faith, one means trust. But the centrality of them is summarized in an adage which the Frierdiker Rebbe and all the Rebbeim noted in Yiddish. Don't know how good your Yiddish is in the room, but tracht gut und wird sein gut. Think positive and the outcomes will be positive. And a later author must have picked it up somewhere in the atmosphere and wrote a book called The Power of Positive Thinking. It's not just a saying. It's not just a nice wort. When you think positive, you create channels at a spiritual level that invite the changes in reality to be able to have positive outcomes. There are actual changes you can make with positive thinking, albeit in a state of challenge, albeit in a state of adversity. When you choose, and it's a choice, most people don't exercise choice. They simply go with the flow. Oh, it's bad. I feel really bad. And then fall into clinical depression and what have you. But if you think positively and picture positively, even in terms of one's health, someone else's health, or economic deprivation, or whatever might be the case, I assure you that you are in that way inviting positive outcomes. So the first thing is to love the person, in this case, a child. Secondly, is to ensure that you think of positive outcomes. That'll change the way you speak to the child. That'll change the way that the love flows through the words to the child. And as we know full well, that the way that you love a person is then reflected back. So before I finally conclude, so Rabbi, come forward. I want to share with you. You know, a Chabad rabbi is a curious creature. Chabad rabbis sort of, they go out and their main thought is, how can I help someone else? It's a high degree of altruism. It's not a career. You don't choose a career to be a Chabad rabbi. To be a Chabad rabbi means you're an emissary of the Rebbe and you're going to try to reflect what the Rebbe was and is, because it continues to influence you. So I think that you're very, very lucky to have two Chabad rabbis here, because they will only think the best for you. And I want to wish you, Rabbi Polter and Rabbi Bahag, great success. And the success means not personal success, but to have many people coming here to hear the wisdoms that you can share. And in so doing, our communities will grow. And may it be that our next lecture together will be in Jerusalem. For those of you who want to continue the conversation, albeit at a distance, there are some CDs, and now it's in USB format, of some of the things that I've been lecturing on and training. All my lectures are complemented by meditational training on each of the CDs, etc. The book deals with personality, looking at through with Kabbalistic eyes and contemporary psychology. And then there are 3 other ones that deal with the emotions of joy, happiness, or God forbid, sadness, depression, anxiety. Feel free to access those. And you have little slips of raffle forms. If you fill it out, in 5 minutes, we'll have a little raffle and someone will win one of the items on the table. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Rabbi Wolf. I think we can all agree that he left us with enough homework until next time he comes. But thank you so much for coming. Please help yourself to the refreshments outside, as well as sign up to our email listing if you want to hear about upcoming events and programming. Thank you all for coming once again. Have a great evening. I think to the back. Yeah. How do we turn this?